We have a whole intro video. This is so cool. This is so fun to be a part of. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, Bodyslam.net proudly brings to you two people who have never and probably will never be the WWE Tag Team Champions of the World, WrestlePerks Nick Perkins at Seahawk Cam Hawkins, and we are not the New Age Outlaws, but we are Break It Down, a D-Generation X retrospective brought to you exclusively by Bodyslam.net. My name is Nick Perkins, and I am joined by my co-host, the man, the myth, the legend. You know him as Seahawk. Ladies and gentlemen, Cameron Hawkins. Cam, how are you doing, man?
I have two words for you. Well done.
Thank you.
Well done.
I did it all in one breath. So
very nice. Now I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me, for bringing me on for this project. I'm excited. This should be really fun.
Yeah, it will be fun. This was an idea that I had almost probably a year ago when I talked with Cassidy Haynes, the managing editor of Body Slam, and I was like, "Hey, I've got this idea. I'm not a podcast guy. I write. I'm a writer, but I'm not like an on-screen guy a lot. But I love Generation X, and I know that nowadays, like a lot of what they did back in the '90s is like it's kind of cringy now. Like we kind of look at it and kind of scoff. But back then, like I was 10 years old when this stuff was happening. It's like ingrained in my childhood as much as Batman and Santa Claus. So it's fun to be able to talk about this stuff with somebody who I believe is kind of like-minded when it comes to D-Generation X.
Absolutely. I was, believe it or not, I was a church boy, man. I was clean down the line on the whistle. So I was not one of the kids who got suspended or detention for saying suck it in middle school.
I was.
Way yeah. I couldn't do it. But no, I was absolutely into it. When you weren't looking, I was going to give you a crotch chop.
Yeah.
But never in front of adults. Never.
I didn't get expelled, but I did get in-school suspension for telling this kid named Cody Hawes to suck it. And like nowadays, like as an adult, if I heard a 10-year-old kid now like tell some other kid to suck it, I'd be like, yeah, that's weird. Why are you doing that?
How dare you invite that man to your crotch? He doesn't want to be there.
Exactly. But that is kind of the impact that DX had in the 90s. And kind of speaking of the 90s, we'll talk a little bit about our wrestling fandom. I'll let you go first and kind of talk about how you became a fan of the illustrious world of professional wrestling.
Absolutely, man. I was born into it. My father, my grandfather, and my uncle were always into wrestling. We were from Southern Maryland. And so while we watched like WWF, primarily it was WCW. So WCW Saturday night at my dad's apartment all the time. I would lay on my dad's back. My dad's a big guy. He's like, he's like 6'2", 6'3". He was walking around about 250. Just lay on my dad's back, watching WCW Saturday night. But my parents got divorced really, really young. And so my mother was in the Air Force, but she also was an usher at what was the Capitol Center in DC back when I was growing up. So like I remember going to like a WWF house show and seeing like a Hogan Flair schmoz as like a little kid.
Oh,
and
wow.
So I was always into it, man. We, watched it while we lived there, moved to Wyoming. I used to go downstairs to the game room and watch every Monday night. Same thing when we got to Texas. So yeah, man, WWF, WCW, a lifer. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Do you have that first wrestling memory that you just remember more than anything else?
In person, it's definitely that house show. Like trying to pull a name out from WCW, man, probably William Regal, like genuinely, like some WCW Saturday night William Regal, like that sounds like roughly what would have been kind of the first thing. Of course, the Monday Night Raws, in New York, that's what really sticks out. But like as like a fully formed, fully fledged thing, probably like Scott Hall coming out on Nitro is probably really, because I'm like 10, 11 at that point. Like that's probably like the start of, okay, something's really happening here. And as a matter of fact, as I say that, let me pull back. What I actually remember, it's still Scott Hall, but Razor Ramon on WWF Superstars on Saturday morning, man. I thought he was the coolest thing in the whole world.
He was.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And you know, so much of what we're going to talk about, even if he was only indirectly involved, like he's a big part of, like, if we're probably going to talk eventually if DX was actually cool, being like Michaels and Triple H being actually cool, but like whatever cool they have, that's influences by, you know, by Hall and the guy on this shirt here had a lot to do with that. But yeah, for sure.
Oh yeah, and we'll get into whether DX was just kind of a rip off of the NWO and stuff like that. That's awesome. I mean, Razor Ramon, he was like the ideal. You're flipping through the channels on Saturday morning and you see Razor Ramon with his orange or purple or green or black trunks. Man, he was the coolest.
Absolutely.
It's funny you mentioned that you lived in Wyoming. I actually live in Wyoming. I have my whole life.
Really? What part?
Casper,
Can you say?
Wyoming.
Okay, I lived in Cheyenne for 2 years as a man.
Okay, yeah. So you're at the capital, a couple hours away. Never really got a whole lot of wrestling shows as a kid. Like, it's Wyoming. We got a couple WCW Nitros. I remember that. And then we got in like the early 2000s, I think WWE came and had a house show where Triple H fought Kane. This was right around the Katie Vick era.
Okay.
Which was fun, but yeah, Wyoming did not get a whole lot of wrestling action, but that's okay because I still grew up as a fan. I remember, I was probably about 10 years old, flipping through the channels, and I bet you'll remember this. Do you remember the story where Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels were in the middle of the ring? Bret Hart was in the wheelchair, right? And he was just cutting a promo on Shawn Michaels, just cutting him up and down. Michaels eventually kicked him out of his wheelchair. You remember that?
Yes.
And for me, for 10-year-old Nick, like not knowing that pro wrestling was, you know, predetermined or scripted, I was like, what just happened? This guy just kicked this poor handicapped man out of his wheelchair.
How dare
What
he?
is that? And I was hooked. I was hooked for life. It took me a few more months to like really become a regular viewer, but man, just like you, I got in right when like the Monday Night Wars were heating up, and right when DX was kind of rising to the top of our television sets. So that is what brings us to this podcast, and I do want to talk a little bit. Obviously, we're talking about D-Generation X. If you can't tell by all the banners and all the logos and everything. And I wanted to talk about DX because it's not because people haven't talked about them before. Everybody has talked about DX, but if I was going to do a podcast, I wanted to do something about something that I was super passionate about. And I grew up with Shawn Michaels, Triple H. Shawn Michaels is my favorite wrestler of all time. I'm pretty sure he's one of yours as well. So kind of tell me, do you remember like your first time seeing DX and any memories of that?
Number one, I hate Shawn Michaels. And let me explain why.
Okay.
I don't think I've told you this story, Nick. I actually told Carmelo Hayes, and we had a really good laugh about it. So I grew up in San Antonio, Texas, where Shawn Michaels is from. Okay.
Sure.
We'll eventually get to the point on here where Shawn Michaels leaves. And then DX 2.0 happens. Now, in between that time, between Shawn Michaels leaving and coming back, you know, he was born again and he found God, and that's fantastic. Before he found God, he found a football on the sidelines of one of my high school games. And he put it dead center on Maximum Sports because Shawn Michaels, in his hiatus, was working for our local Fox News station.
Right.
And he put that football on live TV. And our coaches were so mad we had to run about it the next Monday. So
you know what? That's a good reason to hate Shawn
an
Michaels.
institution. No, absolutely. I mean, the cool thing about DX was where the NWO and Austin, you know, two of the hottest acts at the time, are literally black and white. You know, DX has this pop of color. And again, what's funny to you at 10 or 11 is poopy jokes. And are we saying bad words on here?
Yeah, I think we can.
Dick jokes, and just sexual innuendo, and that's what's funny. And combine that with Shawn Michaels being like, at the time, a giant brat with all the talent in the world. Oh yeah, I was all into it 100%, because I was, we're not news guys at that point, we're not media guys at that point, and so I'm not privy to what Shawn Michaels is doing when the cameras aren't on, right? All I know is he's going out there and nobody moves like him. Nobody has an attitude like him. He's the champ and nobody can take the title off him. Yeah, oh, absolutely, absolutely. And this is before I really understood what Triple H was about or what he was supposed to be about. But Triple H was in on the jokes for Shawn Michaels, and I was with that. Like, I hated that Triple H was getting one over on Owen Hart. How dare you do that to Owen Hart? How dare you? And I thought China was just the coolest thing in the whole world. Like, at that point, I really did. Like, even as a young kid, girls with muscles. Oh yeah, this is great. I love this. So
yeah, we'll do a deep dive on China one of these weeks, because she is phenomenal, and like, for as well known and appreciated as she is, I still think she's probably just underappreciated, and man, what a legend China is.
absolutely.
So this week, for our inaugural episode of Break It Down, I figure with Royal Rumble season just kind of in the rearview mirror, we just got out of it, we're heading into WrestleMania season, I thought that we would cover the 1998 Royal Rumble, which was pretty prolific for a variety of reasons. That was the Rumble that Stone Cold Steve Austin won and kind of set his journey to WrestleMania 14. But it's also the Royal Rumble where Shawn Michaels took on The Undertaker in a casket match. So before we get to the Rumble itself, let's dive into the backstory a little bit. So the Rumble took place 2 months, about give or take, after the Survivor Series, the 97 Survivor Series. Montreal Screwjob, yes, we will be talking about that sometime, because again, I don't think people have talked about it enough.
Yeah. I mean, guys, if you're not familiar with it, it's pretty interesting. There might be some things you pick up on, and it might inform some things that are going on today. So just stay tuned for that. There might be, like, I don't know, something on microfiche somewhere, or something buried deep in the library with some information like on this specific event. Not a whole lot of media covering it, but if you can find something to kind of get yourself up to speed beforehand, it may help out with what we talk about, possibly. Absolutely.
It's kind of I would say it's wrestling's best kept secret.
Really. Absolutely.
So Survivor Series was in November. The Royal Rumble was in January. In between that was actually their very own pay-per-view. It was called D-Generation X. I believe this was the first time that a pay-per-view was actually named after an act. I know that there were some in-your-houses with like kind of the themes of some of the wrestlers, whether it was like Buried Alive or Stone Cold Steve Austin or Vader Time, that didn't actually have Vader on the show. But D-Generation X was the first pay-per-view named after an act. And at that show, Shawn Michaels took on Ken Shamrock for the WWF Championship. And this was right after Survivor Series. So Bret Hart, he left the company. He joined WCW. Shawn Michaels took on Ken Shamrock. But during the match, Bret Hart's brother, Owen Hart, came and interfered and attacked Shawn Michaels. I don't know about you, I thought it was maybe real, because that there's some bad blood between the Hart family and Shawn Michaels, but evidently that was a story, and for some reason, it was not Owen Hart versus Shawn Michaels at the Royal Rumble. Was that weird?
Knowing what we know now, not so much, right? We're going to get into, and Nick did a great job of really covering exactly what we're going to be dealing with, both on screen and off screen, and really how the backstage stuff really informs what we see. But even the idea of Owen being put in a position to look good, I think was not going to happen. You know what I mean? It's knowing how few people have power now because of the things that happened in 1997 and 1998 and a big part of 1996 and 1995, right? knowing how little power people have now, I think really, really, really helps to inform the story here. Because Owen was really odd man out at this point, right? Like Brett's gone. We've seen Bulldog get dogged, for lack of a better way of saying it. Neidhart has had his issues. Just, is it surprising? Yes, but it's so personal, and Shawn Michaels at that point seemed to be so caught up in himself and so paranoid with the things around him that even the idea of putting Owen Hart in a position on a level close to him, I think would have been too threatening. So yes, it's weird, like watching it, not knowing any of these things. How is this guy not the guy that they put in position, right? We're not going to get around to the Sami Zayns and Daniel Bryans of the world and how that stuff's all kind of informed by this too. But yeah, the idea that this is the person who literally should have the most problem with you in the world. Not only are you costing his family titles, you're running them out of the company. Yeah, and just never came to fruition. Yeah.
It did not. Owen Hart would end up feuding with Triple H, and we'll get into that. But before I do, I want to read. We're gonna consult the Wrestling Observer a lot. Dave Meltzer, love him or hate him, he is a bona fide historian of this company. There is nobody that I know that has covered this sport for as long as he has. He's a testament to what was going on. So I'm going to read a little bit about what he wrote back in 1997.
Speaking of Dave, like somewhere in history, there's a guy in a powdered wig who really wants to put Webster in a headlock. Damn him in his dictionary. Like that's absolutely happening somewhere. So sometimes the guys who tell the history, they're not all loved, but the history is absolutely there. So yeah, let's get to it.
Absolutely. So he wrote, the WWFD Generation X concept as the top heel contingent is, of course, almost a total knockoff on the WCW concept of the NWO. The trendy misspellings, the gestures designed to get heels over as cult baby faces, the personalities, ironically, key members of both groups, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, and Syxx in WCW, and Shawn Michaels and Hunter Hearst Helmsley in WWF, were all members of the so-called clique that was riding high in WWF during Nash's reign as the WWF champion. We are eventually going to cover the clique as a group, because I would say that they were kind of the godfathers of both DX and the NWO. So one of these days we will cover the clique in full. But Meltzer wrote that, in fact, there would be no D-Generation X heel group in WWF, as the company never would have gone in such a different direction had WCW not been so successful taking the same direction. And now WWF is trying to take that direction one step further. So let me ask you, let's have a discussion once and for all. We touched on it a little bit earlier. Is DX a carbon copy or a ripoff of the New World Order?
I don't think so. I don't. And we have the hindsight, right? Like we have the ability to look back on this thing in its totality and say, more or less what it was, right? The reason I say that it's not, is it team of guys who are real life friends running roughshod over their coworkers and the authority figures in their company? Sure. That part is true. Like you can't argue that, right? What the difference is, the NWO were adopting like specific gang mentality that they picked up on from rap music in the early 90s, right? Like that's very much what is influencing the things they do, the way they run around, the tactics, the spray paint and the jumping and the get down or lay down, you're with us or against us. Like that is very much what the NWO was about. DX was way more high school quarterback and high school running back, that regardless of what they do, we need them in the game, right? Are they jerks? Sure. Are they acting like children? Sure. Do they talk all through class? Do they make jokes that aren't funny? Are they late? Are they disrupting the lunchroom? Yes, they're doing all of those things. But we need to win this game. right? Like Shawn Michaels is very much, and he will tell you. So I'm not speaking out of turn. Shawn Michaels was a spoiled brat back then,
Right.
who happened to have the boss's ear and get away with what he wanted to, right? That's what he was. Now, did Hall and Nash have Eric Bischoff's ear? Sure. But that was because Eric Bischoff thought the dudes were cool, right? Like that was like, okay, cool guy, you think this is going to work. But again, Shawn Michaels was the most talented wrestler in America probably at that time. When we're talking about what you can do bell for bell, Shawn Michaels was that guy. He really was, right? And the other part of that is we don't got Bret. Like Bret's time had passed, right? I'm a huge Bret Hart fan. If I'm watching a match, I'm watching Bret Hart over Shawn Michaels. I'm not knocking Shawn Michaels. Like if you told me, Cam, these are the reasons that Shawn Michaels is the very best in-ring wrestler for whatever period, I say, yeah, I wouldn't argue with you. I'm still going to watch Bret, right? But Bret Hart's time had passed. They felt like they didn't have the bread for Bret or whatever Vince's excuse was, right? We're not all the way there with Austin yet. We're not all the way there with Rock yet. We wanted to go there with Triple H. Triple H played himself a little bit, and I'm sure that's going to come up, right? So what do we got? Like Ken Shamrock, I don't think ever fully got to where they wanted him to be on the promo side, right? So he's not there. Yeah, Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker, while great and a great foil for Shawn, The Undertaker, they used him in spots. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think you can have a promotion entirely based around The Undertaker being champion for a very long time. Undertaker can't go sit at your press conference. Undertaker can't perm his hair out and put that. Shawn Michaels got that one brown blazer that he looked really handsome in, right? Undertaker can't do that. So your best option available, you're going to give him what he wants, because at this point, you're also fearing him jumping ship, right? Like, if I don't treat him right, he might go over there with them. And then that's one less piece that I have and more of a reason for them to tune in over there. So, yeah, I think they are different in terms of not only personality, but what they represented to each company and what they presented on screen. Like, again, it is guys in black T-shirts with cool lettering, saying catchphrases and running the show, but in completely different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. That was perfect. That was
this is why you asked me to come on.
That's exactly right. Yeah. That was I agree with everything you said. I'm sure probably most everybody watching this, if there are any, would agree with you too. Jim Ross.
Wait till YouTube when they say we don't know what we're talking about and they give us point by point about why they were the exact same thing. It's coming in paragraph form.
Can't wait. I can't wait. So at the DX pay-per-view, we already mentioned that Shawn Michaels took on Ken Shamrock. Michaels won by disqualification when Owen Hart interfered. Triple H actually fought Sergeant Slaughter in a boot camp match, which, I mean, I guess that they thought that Sergeant Slaughter would kind of give Triple H the rub. I don't know if that's exactly what happened, but regardless, it doesn't matter. Triple H beat him. So the night after the DX pay-per-view, and before we continue, I've got to make a confession. I have got my blinders on. This month between the DX pay-per-view and the Royal Rumble pay-per-view, like that 97 to 98 month, was the month that I solidified myself as a pro wrestling fan. This was when I was telling my mom, like, Mom, I got to just stay up a little bit later. Like, DX is on, like, Undertaker's fighting Kane. Like, this was the month. It's the month that I became a pro wrestling fan. So I might be a little bit biased based on nostalgia, so I'm counting on you to kind of keep me honest here.
Talking about how young we were, that literally means that your bedtime was 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Matter of fact, doesn't that mean your bedtime was 8 o'clock?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, because you were in Wyoming.
Same.
Like I couldn't. When Nitro went to 3 hours, I think I was still in Wyoming at that point. And so, yeah, man, you got to go to bed. And then when they go to bed, creep down them stairs, put that thing on the volume 2. Now you use the volume at 2 for a different reason. But back then, Put that volume at 2 so you can sneak it in. But no, yeah, same thing. Like when I was watching Raw originally, I was on the East Coast. And so it wouldn't come on till 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
You got 1 hour. I had 1 hour and that was a wrap. So yeah, missed a lot. But yeah, no, because that was, you're saying your blinders were on at that point. That's really when you get DX in full swing, though.
Yeah.
I didn't like how they treated Sergeant Slaughter because, like, I'm a kid and like you can't be mean to old people. You can't do that. But they used to dog him out. It was so bad, and especially like Hunter was really mean to him. Like Shawn Michaels is like he's a jerk, but like in a smirking kind of way, right? Like there's a certain charm to it. Again, the high school football analogy. The quarterback's a jerk, but he has a $1 million smile. Triple H does not have $1 million smile. Triple H is mean linebacker guy. He was just bullying this old man the entire time.
Telling him he's going to bang his wife and how his dick is so much bigger.
And he always did it like in very tight-fitting polos. He was like early Kanye. He was very mean.
Early Kanye, Triple H. Yeah. That's fair. So, speaking of that, he was the night after the DX pay-per-view, DX comes to the ring. Triple H started a promo by degrading Sergeant Slaughter again, telling him that he was too much of a man for both Slaughter and his wife, which continued the theme of Hunter talking about how big his dick was. Then he gave the mic to Shawn Michaels, who told Ken Shamrock that the world's most dangerous man wasn't dangerous enough. Michaels said that thankfully he was still the World Wrestling Federation champion thrice over, and he was also the coveted European champion. Which brings me to my point. Like, watching all this back now, Shawn Michaels never took the European Championship seriously. And so my question to you is, did that mean that, like, were audiences taking the European Championship seriously, do you think?
Shawn Michaels killed the prestige of the European title very, very early.
Yeah.
Right? Like, thank God for X-Pac and D'Lo Brown for putting us back on the right path.
Yeah.
No, because the European title was basically handcrafted for the British Bulldog, and it fits so well. And you know, it's this is not going to be a podcast about how wrestling is high school. I promise, unless it is, because wrestling is like high school to a level none of you really understand. Like, I can tell you about some conversations. It's high school, but the thing about it, like, I want your girlfriend because she's your girlfriend, not because I like her. Like, that's really what that was. You know what I mean? And then once I got her, again, I was never interested in her in the first place. So now that I got her, whatever. Yeah, that's exactly what it was. No, I do not think he ever treated that thing like an important thing. And there are people in the world like Chris Jericho and Christian and the Booker T's and the Edges of the world who, even after becoming world champions, and after being big time acts, like especially like Agent Christian, who did so much with like your TLCs and put tag team wrestling back on the map. Guys like that always appreciated Intercontinental title, US title, even if it came after their world title runs because of history and prestige. Shawn Michaels was not one of those people. Once he was WWF champion, nothing else ever really mattered, including the European title, which he just did not think very much of.
Yeah, he did not, which we'll get to later, how he actually lost the European Championship. But before we get to that, this was the night where Shawn Michaels, I was 10 years old, and so probably back then I liked it. Nowadays, I am not a toilet humor guy. I don't really like poopy jokes. But Shawn Michaels took his attention to Owen Hart, and he said, and I quote, that Owen Hart, or the Hart Foundation, was like a big, huge, nasty, smelly, smoking, stinking turd. Michael said that they flushed the Hart Foundation down the toilet, but that Owen Hart was like that one little nugget that just refused to go down. He gave Owen Hart a nickname that would literally last the rest of his career, the rest of his life. Unfortunately, he called him Nugget. You remember Jason Sensation? I am not a nugget. I am a human being.
Jason smoked that, by the way.
Yeah, he was so good.
He was fantastic. But yeah, and you know what's funny? It wasn't until I was doing the prep for this show that I realized that's where Nugget came from. Dead
Right.
serious. I just thought he was like
Somebody
saying he
called
was
him Nugget.
crazy and he was a little crazy guy. No, he was calling him a piece of shit.
Yeah.
Huh.
Not even the full piece of shit.
Yeah. Ugh. Ugh.
Yeah.
Disrespectful.
Hopefully, maybe one day if this kicks off, we could get Jason Sensation on. That'd be cool, huh?
I'll send a nice email.
Yeah.
Like I know Jason Sensation, right? I'll send a nice email.
Got him on speed dial.
Yeah.
So during this Raw, after he completely just buried Owen Hart, they decided that they were going to stay in the ring until Owen Hart came out to face them. They weren't going to just sit in the ring. They were going to play a game of strip poker in the middle of the ring on Monday Night Raw on live television. Was that the epitome of the Attitude Era, do you think?
It was the epitome of DX, I think,
Right.
specifically, because it was like Shawn Michaels is, you know, when Jeff Hardy takes his shirt off and like the girls go crazy, but they're going crazy in the middle of a show where everybody already has their shirts off. And so it's like far be it from me to tell you what you should and should not find attractive or where your levels should go, right? But it was just so like you had to convince your brain that stripping in the middle of a wrestling show was out of order when everyone on the show is one hand snatch from being naked, you know? But it was very much that DX humor. Like it was, like you say, toilet humor, but it was that sophomoric thing of man sticks finger through zipper to make it look like penis. That's what it was, you know?
Right.
But yeah, it was very much the epitome of what DX was about. Pretty much through those first two runs, it was absolutely that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? As a kid, I loved it.
Oh yeah. Look at him. They get naked. Yeah, it was great. And you knew Shawn Michaels was not supposed to be doing that. Right. Even in a world where everybody's almost naked. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we thought there's a difference between trunks and your boxers, but there's really not. So they're playing strip poker throughout the show. The headbangers eventually come out. They are asking DX, what are you doing? We're supposed to have a match. DX flips the table over. They smash a bottle of Jack Daniels on their head, attack him. Owen Hart eventually comes out, attacks Shawn Michaels, and that is that week's Raw. It was a pretty good one. It was kind of the first in like a month-long period where DX kept trying to top themselves. You know, later on in the next year, Austin would always try to top himself from the previous week. That was what the DX did much before that.
Absolutely.
So the next week, and this is interesting, the next week, Shawn Michaels and Triple H team up to take on the Legion of Doom, the Road Warriors, which could have been a dream match, really, had they taken the match seriously. They didn't really. It didn't get that much far in the match because the New Age Outlaws, Badass Billy Gunn, the Road Dogg Jesse James, they ended up interfering in the match. They attacked Legion of Doom, and this was kind of the first time that Triple H and Shawn Michaels, Billy Gunn, and the Road Dogg, they kind of came together to take out the Legion of Doom. And obviously we know what would happen next year with Billy Gunn and Road Dogg, but this was kind of the first chance that these two teams got together. Did you think that the New Age Outlaws would be a good fit for DX?
I like the recruiting period. Like I really did. Like there's in a time where there was nothing subtle about DX, nothing subtle about storytelling. Those two getting their attention and being like, yeah, okay. And even though them not being together, but having very similar gimmicks at the time in that, you know, New Age Outlaw in and of itself, breaking the rules in a way that's kind of fresh was what DX was doing too. And so, you know, having those similar gimmicks at the time, it was cool. Like watching Shawn be like, yeah, all right, yeah, I see him. Okay, all right. And then, you know, eventually when things broke down, I really did that. Yeah, them being kind of next in line to join. Yeah, but I did see that eventually being what was coming, especially as we got closer and closer to WrestleMania. You saw their trajectory for sure.
Yeah, they would almost end up teaming at a No Way Out, the pay-per-view after the Royal Rumble. Shawn Michaels was injured. We'll get to that. But something else interesting that happened in this time frame was Shawn Michaels and Triple H, they were scheduled for a house show. They were going to have a match in somewhere in Arkansas, I think Little Rock or Memphis. But the crowd kept throwing trash in the ring because obviously Shawn Michaels was kind of winding them up. They threw trash in the ring to the point that Shawn Michaels refused to come out for his match, or he refused to have the match. He got on the mic and said, well, that just cost you your main event. Mm-hmm. And then he went to the back, and this is from the Observer, a literal riot broke out because the main event didn't happen. From the Observer, Meltzer wrote, there was an attempt by Dude Love, who was at the event but couldn't wrestle, to get the crowd to chant HBK to get Michaels to change his mind and wrestle, but he refused to come back out. So Jerry Lawler tried to apologize to the crowd, but the crowd wouldn't take it. That, combined with no refunds being offered when some fans began demanding them at the box office, made the mood of the fans even worse, with the general feeling of leaving the building among many fans, according to their reports. They said that WWF had killed the city for themselves. So that was one night. The next night,
that's the first one, and give us because there's more.
Yeah, there's more. This is again from Meltzer. Based on the report we had of the incident, the fans' actions could not be blamed strictly or even largely on Michaels inciting them because they were getting drunk and whatnot. But what happened was Shawn Michaels' gimmick was to incite the audience into throwing things at him, including in at least one recent case by saying things like he's heard the fans in Insert City have terrible aim, which would make him the target of people throwing stuff, which is kind of his own fault. But it was Michaels who decided to walk out when the fans were so unruly. He actually walked out of the match again. WWF blamed the problem on local security, but WWF received reports from the agents on the road that fans were throwing empty bottles, they were throwing batteries, they were throwing ice. So Shawn Michaels just said, you know what? I'm out of here. I'm not coming back. Let's see. This is when things get real mad. So Michaels and Helmsley ended up coming back to the ring and riling up the crowd. They were already mad because evidently the undercard of the show wasn't that good. So naturally, they became target practice again. But when a piece of paper, that's according to Meltzer, hit Michaels, he told the crowd again, you just lost your main event. DX did not come back to the ring. The crowd was chanting for him. Helmsley was supposed to have an opponent, but they didn't come out. They started throwing chairs and whiskey bottles everywhere. Several fans tried to get refunds and were unsuccessful. And then a second riot took place. Meltzer wrote that the incident was so out of hand that it was reported on the news that night, with at least one report giving the impression that the WWF wouldn't be allowed back in the city. So actual fights were breaking out in the crowd because of D-Generation X. And I know that back in WCW, when Hogan turned his back, people were throwing crowds. Is there a place in wrestling for people throwing stuff into the ring, or should that stuff just be left completely out?
Great visuals should never do it. Should never, ever do it. Like in 2023, there's probably a closer line to wrestler and fan than ever before. And especially now, I think people are way too familiar. No, I don't think so, because what if you hit a guy in the eye? Like, you wouldn't do that at a play. You know what I mean? Like, you wouldn't do that you wouldn't do it at an NBA game because Ron Artest will take your face off. But yeah, no, there's really no place for that. Does it mean in some cases that what you're presenting is getting the appropriate reaction? To a point, yeah, but no, like, just sit back and have fun, man. Enjoy it in the moment and then go home. It should never be that. Now, it's funny you say that. Like, Do you lose money with riots and not being able to go back to a city? Are you literally killing the territory? Sure. I'm sure Vince McMahon loved it. I'm sure he did. I'm sure he did. I'm sure it just made him think that Shawn and Triple H in China were the most over thing in the entire world, and they probably got put into better positions because of it. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, later on we'll talk about right before WrestleMania 14, Shawn Michaels actually did get hit in the head with a battery and almost refused to come back out at that show. So, like, I don't know, maybe like paper cups, like stuff like that. Maybe that's okay, like depending on the situation back then. But like, who's throwing batteries and who's throwing like?
Why do you have a battery on you?
Exactly, like you had a plan to throw it, and that means you're the asshole, right?
That it does mean you're the asshole through and through. Like yeah, there's no. And again, we know stories from people who thought wrestling was real in the sense of they're actually hurting the person I like. And we're talking 70s, early 80s, but by the time in 1997, you knew what was what. You know what I mean? And it's nasty. It's gross. Have I gone to a wrestling show and had too much to drink? Absolutely. But I'm fighting the crowd. I'm not fighting the wrestlers.
Yeah, you'd lose.
Yeah.
Well, you might not. I would.
Oh, I would lose my freedom. You know what I'm saying? Like, if nothing else, yeah, man, I'll fight a fan for saying something wrong, but I'm not ruining the show. But there's also the added aspect of people thinking that they're part of the show, which I think comes into play when the actual violence happens. But no, there's no place for that. Absolutely not.
Yeah, agreed. Well, luckily, they made it through those couple of house shows, and on the December 22nd Raw's War, this is my probably favorite episode of Raw's War. And I'll tell you why. This was right before Christmas, right? Shawn Michaels actually ended up facing Triple H for the European Championship. Let me tell you how it happened. Things started out innocently enough with Triple H, Chyna, and Shawn Michaels coming to the ring wearing a couple of terry cloth robes. And if you've been paying attention so far, you know that DX likes to take their clothes off. In order to shock the viewer, to give them kind of a little something extra this Christmas, they took off their robes and they were wearing full-on thongs. That's what they were wearing in real life. On TV, they blurred it out. So the viewing audience actually thought that they were completely naked. That's what DX likes to do. So they were having fun with that. They were saying Merry Xmas, like DX, you get it. But then Sergeant Slaughter came out, who was the WWF commissioner at the time. He came out and told Shawn Michaels that he hadn't defended the European Championship in 30 days, in 60 days, in 90 days almost. And if he wanted to keep the title, he would have to defend it. Shawn Michaels said, yeah, no problem. I'm the showstopper. I'm the main event. I'll beat anybody you put in front of me. Sergeant Slaughter smirked and said, all right, you're going to take on Triple H. And when I heard this as a kid, mine was blown.
Same.
You're telling me Shawn Michaels and Triple H are going to have a match? And they played it perfectly. All right. So Triple H, he got back on the mic and he told Slaughter, hey, listen, I know what you're trying to do. All right. You're trying to cause a rift between me and Shawn Michaels because you know that things will be tough when I beat Michaels for the title. Shawn Michaels is like, I was with you until you said you could beat me. Triple H was like, well, yeah, I could beat you. And that's where the seeds of dissent were sown. Throughout the rest of the night, they cut backstage to Triple H and Shawn Michaels arguing. Triple H was saying that he was sick of Shawn Michaels saying, oh, I'm the showstopper, I'm the main event. Nope. Shawn Michaels said, hey, this guy's been riding my coattail throughout the past few months. Like, it's time to teach him a lesson, and I'm going to be his teacher. So, at the beginning of the second hour, called the War Zone, they come out for the match. Before Triple H can get in the ring, Owen Hart comes out and attacks him. Because for some reason, they had kind of slipped Owen Hart from Shawn Michaels to feuding with Triple H, right? Because Michaels, we'll get to who he's going to fight at the Royal Rumble, but they needed an opponent for Triple H. It was Owen Hart. So Owen Hart attacked him. They had to postpone the main event till the end of the show. But finally, it happened. Triple H came out. And by the way, like during these shows, DX would get like full entrances like 3 times a night.
Yeah. They were
Like
the show.
would,
Absolutely.
especially on this show, literally 4 separate times. They had each guy coming out with their full entrance, the full music, the music videos, all of it. But finally, end of the show, Shawn Michaels versus Triple H. They lock up. And as soon as they lock up, Shawn Michaels takes a pratfall. He lands on his back. Hunter Hearst Helmsley runs back and forth between the ropes, gives him a fake little splash, which total mockery of the Ultimate Warrior. If you remember Triple H's match with Warrior
at WrestleMania. Yeah.
It was a complete just like mockery of that. He gingerly laid on Shawn Michaels, got the 1, the 2, the 3. Triple H is the new European champion. We had been bamboozled, according to Jim Cornette. Do you remember this?
Yes, I remember it happening. And this is 97, right?
Right.
Okay, so if this is 97, I am 11 because this is still what, November?
December now.
This is December. Okay, so I might have if this is the second week of December, I'm about to turn 12. I'm like 11. Yes, they got me. Like I'm sure somewhere there's a 37-year-old guy watching this show who's watching and says, you know what? They're going to trick us and he's going to give Hunter the belt. I was not that person at 11, 12 years old. I was, oh my God, they totally got over on Slaughter. They're geniuses. And now they're both champions, right?
It was a genius move.
Absolutely. I was shocked and stunned in the moment. Absolutely.
I was a little disappointed that we didn't get the match, but as a fan of DX, I was like, of course that's what they would do. That's genius. My question, though, because this happened like a year and a couple months before the famed finger poke of doom, which was the same premise when Kevin Nash fought Hulk Hogan, kind of did the same thing. Hogan poked Nash. Nash took the fall. Hogan became the world champion. Obviously, like, there's differences. Like, this was for the European Championship, which we've already discussed was kind of a mockery anyway. Like, nobody really cared about the European Championship. WCW Championship was a whole nother level. But why do you think the finger poke of doom got such a bad rap? Well, this one, which did it first, kind of slipped under the radar.
I think you laid it out just now and earlier in that 1, it's a secondary title. 2, it's a very new title. And 3, Shawn Michaels had already devalued it at that point by, even if it's not something we knew in the moment, the fact that it was like, you don't have to be Wrestling Insider to know that European title and British Bulldog go together, right? And it was not one that Shawn Michaels had like really defended or, it just kind of went around with him, right? And so when it happened, it was like, okay, something for Triple H. Like, now they're both champions. Again, it put him like that. And there's also a lineage with the WCW title. There's a history. There's a prestige. And one thing about WCW, if nothing else, like, was the WWF Championship the most important thing in WWF? Absolutely, it was. But they also had other things happening, right? Like, there was also there was the IC title. They were so heavy on gimmicks, the Undertakers and the Mankind's, and there were feuds, and it was supposed to be this larger than life thing, and all those things. The WCW Championship, the NWA Championship, had always been carried with prestige and honor. And when you had that thing, it was because you were the guy, the company trusted you, they wanted to put you like on your cereal boxes, on your late night shows. Like it was the most important thing. You were who they were putting in that big Cadillac riding all through the South, right? And so for that to be basically given away for a political move by a wrestler, that was looked down upon. The European title was just a piece of metal, right? that wasn't even on a guy from Europe. And
Right.
so, yeah, like we knew that WCW was in bad shape when Hall and Nash were playing trash get ball with titles. We knew
Right.
that, right? But they weren't doing that with the World Heavyweight Championship. They were doing it with there was a TV title at that point, right? It was the TV belt or the US belt. I think it was the TV belt.
Yep.
But no, you couldn't have got away with that with the WWF title, but the European title for sure, for sure. Like it was just, and it fit Triple H and Shawn Michaels and what they were doing. Like their whole thing was to be counterculture and to spit in the face of prestige. The NWO was not that. The NWO was to take over and have power.
Yeah.
And they literally transferred power in a way that spit on tradition. It wasn't a transfer of power. It was just a mockery of the establishment when DX did it. So different things there.
Yeah, that is once again great perspective. That's why we brought you on, Cameron Hawkins, with all the insight.
Yeah.
So after Triple H beat Shawn Michaels, they did this mock celebration. Hunter did the Rocky thing. He's like, "Yo, Adrian, I did it." Michaels is blubbering. Jim Cornette said he lost his smile again, which is, by the way, Jim Cornette on commentary, he's amazing. He's so funny. Like, he's kind of not a great human being, but as a commentator, as a speaker, so entertaining.
He's the best thing about 1997. He just also never figured out that it wasn't 1997 anymore.
Or
That's
1977.
yeah, there you go.
This was also a case, and Dave Meltzer broke this up. He hated it. He hated this whole thing. You and I were saying that this kind of made a mockery of it, but you kind of expect it. Dave Meltzer acted as if this was like the NWA championship and that they did it on on Ric Flair's grave. But he did mention the fact that this was yet another time where Shawn Michaels lost a championship without actually losing it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
He'd done it with the world title. A couple times he'd done it with the IC title. Now with the European title, do you think that Shawn Michaels just didn't like getting beat?
You want to talk about writing history from the perspective of the winners. We talk about Bret Hart taking wrestling way too seriously. And then you look at Shawn Michaels. And Shawn Michaels was more protective over what was presented than anybody else for a longer period of time, but he did it in a way that for some reason people painted Bret Hart as the one who it wasn't any fun, but yeah, Shawn Michaels was very much he was concrete and concise about who he would not lose to, when and where. And the thing about Shawn Michaels is not only would he go backstage and say why he wouldn't do it, then he get out in front of the camera and allude to why he wouldn't do it. Yeah. So
he doesn't lay down for anybody.
Yeah. Shawn Michaels. And again, I don't feel bad saying Shawn Michaels wasn't the greatest guy back then, because Shawn Michaels will make it a point to tell you he was not the greatest guy back then. But no. Shawn Michaels was way too serious about the Shawn Michaels business, where I don't think any of that helped his legacy at all. Like, Shawn Michaels is not judged on his wins and losses. Other wrestlers are. Other wrestlers are judged on the number of titles they won, the number of WrestleManias they main evented. Shawn Michaels was so good in the ring. Shawn Michaels, nobody knows Eddie Guerrero's win-loss record or Kurt Angle's win-loss record or even Rey Mysterio's. We just know they were great. And they are treated as greats. I think Shawn Michaels figured that out really late in the game. But yeah, nobody, when they talk about great WWF, WWE champions, Shawn Michaels still comes up. And it ain't because of how many people he beat or how many times he lost. Yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. This is finally when his feud with The Undertaker would kick into gear. All right, so the next week, Triple H comes out at the end of last week after they did their European title match. Sergeant Slaughter came out and he told Triple H that he was going to defend his newly won European Championship against Owen Hart next week. So this was a great example of like giving us something to look forward to next week, right? Triple H came out that week though with a knee brace on, with crutches. He told the audience that he could not take on Owen Hart for the title that night because he hurt his knee. Turns out this was actually like a legitimate injury. At first, I thought it was just DX like trying to mess with him again, but it was a real injury. Triple H also said that Shawn Michaels was not in attendance because he had a 101-degree temperature. So he was at home, kind of resting on his laurels, resting up. But then the lights went out and we heard the Undertaker's music. And we thought, oh man, Undertaker's going to come out. He's going to make an example of Triple H. He's going to sacrifice Triple H and kind of send a message to Shawn Michaels. So the Druids come out. You remember the Druids, right? Those guys in the hood.
Remember the Druids. You know, I still play Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks to this day. So yeah, that aesthetic is not lost on me.
Right. So you got the Druids, and they're carrying out a casket, which the Undertaker has been known to travel from place to place in on occasion. So the Druids are carrying the casket down. Triple H says, this is where it gets good. He says, "What's going on? What's happening? The Undertaker's here?" Well, he said, "Oh, nice, Undertaker. You're going to pick on a crippled guy. Well, I guess if that's the case, there's only one thing to do. Break it down." And with that, the DX music hit. Shawn Michaels popped up out of the casket. They got us again. They got us again, Cam. What is wrong with us? Why did we fall for it?
We tend to believe that, I mean, we're good people and they're not. That's what it is. We're good people and they're not. We're like, no, I hope everything's okay with everybody. Nope, they're being jerks again. Like even with one of them hurt, they still find a way to do it. Yeah, very nasty. And again, so much of it was like the Undertaker is just this super serious character. Bret Hart, so serious. Ken Shamrock, so serious. Owen Hart, so serious. And just everything was done. Some personal, some just professional. And professional in the sense of what we see on screen. It's like genuine. But it was just all just throwing it in the face of these people who take their lives seriously. It's very nasty.
Was it kind of weird, like seeing the Undertaker? You brought up a good point. Like he's this super serious, like Clint Eastwood, like most professional wrestler you could ever ask for. Was it weird kind of seeing him interjected into this like sophomoric humor angle with Shawn Michaels and Triple H, or do you think he was a good foil for him?
I think he was a good foil because he was so serious, because he would cut through the BS. Like I think that was really good. And then like that's when you really start to get shades of really good in-ring Undertaker, like with stuff with Shawn Michaels. And so yeah, no, I think it was I think it really worked because at that point, and you know, I say at that point, it lasted almost 15 years. You didn't think anybody could beat the Undertaker. Like you didn't. You thought the Undertaker would get the job done almost every time in every situation. And so even if you were a fan of DX, you were scared. If you weren't a fan of DX, Undertaker was going to handle that business.
Right. And it was so satisfying because you knew the Undertaker was going to finally shut Shawn Michaels up.
Mm-hmm.
Man, the sexy boy needed it. But before that, Shawn Michaels jumped out of the casket, and he and Triple H and Chyna gathered in the ring, and they talked about the two newest members of D-Generation X. I don't know if you remember, it wasn't the New Age Outlaws, it wasn't Jim Neidhart, it wasn't X-Pac, it was Chyna's boobs.
You know, salute to the lady. Whatever a woman chooses to do to her body, as long as it's her choice, we are in favor of it. And 11-year-old Cam was very much in favor of it. So
10-year-old Nick was on it. Like those may have been the first like boobs that I ever really focused on, to be honest, now that I think about it.
Yeah, and now you wear glasses because you look too hard. That's how that works. So,
yeah.
But no, yes, salute her. Absolutely. And they just, again, they're such children. We see them, we know. But thank you for pointing them out. Absolutely. Thanks, DX.
And that's what they said. They said in one of the documentaries that they made that like everybody was going to see that China like got breast implants, which is totally fine. Like you said, like that was her choice. Great. Everybody was going to know it. So why ignore it? Why pretend that it didn't happen? Let's take it head on. Let's let the audience in on the joke. I think
we're in on it. Thanks, guys. Again,
we sure were. So Shawn Michaels had to that night defend the WWF Championship against Owen Hart. This was not the first time that they met. They had wrestled a couple years prior, kind of shortly after Shawn Michaels was kind of involved in like a gang beating by a bunch of Marines. You remember that? That's
I do very much remember that.
So after that match, he and Owen Hart fought. Owen Hart gave him an enziguri, and this was one of the first like real angles of WWF Raw. Was happening, I think, in 1995. Owen Hart kicked him in the back of the head. You knew Shawn Michaels was hurt. You knew that like something had happened previously. So when Owen Hart kicked him in the head, Michaels just passed out in the middle of the ring. It was super real, and it was scary. You thought like, oh man, Shawn Michaels really got hurt.
Owen's reaction to it was everything too.
And Vince McMahon came down and was checking on him. It felt like a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, just you saw Owen go from like try to maintain character as long as he could, like in that moment. But yeah, it's a very like long lasting visual for sure.
Yeah. So this time they fought again. The match wasn't as good as that one, but it was still pretty good. I mean, anytime you get Shawn Michaels and Owen Hart in a ring, like, man, if they had a pay-per-view match, if they could have gone like 20 or 30 minutes on some in your house, maybe they did, actually. I don't remember, but those two made magic, just like Shawn Michaels did with Brother Brett.
Absolutely.
Oh, so after that match, we cut to the next week. All right. So Shawn Michaels comes out to the ring. He doesn't have Triple H. He doesn't have China. He wants to have some words with The Undertaker by himself. So he came out with his full entrance once again, and he said that The Undertaker at Royal Rumble, I'm going to prove to you that I am still the showstopper, the main event, the icon, and the World Wrestling Federation champion. I don't lay down for anybody, especially you, dead man. He said, I am going to beat your dead ass. And if you had any guts, you would come out and face me right now. So Shawn Michaels, he's calling out The Undertaker, right?
Shawn Michaels, bravest man in the world, based on the promo.
I would have thought The Undertaker, but it kind of made you think that he had a plan in the back of his mind, right? Like by this point, as the audience, we're kind of onto him. Like we're getting it now. We know that you're going to mess with us. So he calls him out. The lights go out. Casket comes out one more time with the Druids. Druids are carrying the casket has all sorts of DX graffiti on it. It's saying "suck it." It's saying "break it down." So you know as the audience, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. DX is not going to fool us again. We know that Triple H is in that casket, right? Shawn Michaels knows it too. He's saying, oh, I thought you'd be a little bit more creative. I didn't know you'd just copy what I did. But as he is talking smack to the casket, you see Triple H and China come out at the top of the stage. And they're trying to get Shawn Michaels' reaction. Hey, look, that's not us. Shawn Michaels finally notices them, and he does the classic sitcom move. Well, if you're up there, who's that? Casket opens up. There's the Undertaker. Grabs him by the throat, drags him into the casket, and that's how the show goes off the air. You have no idea what happened to Shawn Michaels that week. Do you remember watching this, and what was your reaction?
I again reflecting on it. At this point, I'm like, wow, they were really close together in that casket. But no, man, he definitely dragged him to the word I wasn't allowed to say. I was sure of it.
As was I. But for some reason,
great visual, absolutely.
It was so cool. Like you knew, like, oh, finally, Shawn Michaels got his comeuppance. The weird thing is, the very next week, Shawn Michaels is none the worse for wear. The show opens with Triple H, Shawn Michaels, and China inside of a limo. They're at Penn State, I believe the show is. And because they're at Penn State, because they're at a college, of course, they have to talk about sleeping with some of the female college students.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, I think Shawn Michaels was like in his 30s, so it's kind of weird now, but whatever. Shawn Michaels also said, and this was interesting, this was, I believe, this is the week before Royal Rumble. Mm-hmm. So we're almost there. All right, so there's just one more show before the Royal Rumble, and Shawn Michaels tells The Undertaker, I've got an announcement, but it doesn't involve you. It involves your family. Obviously, by that, we know that he's talking about Kane. And before we get into this part of the show, and we're almost done, we're almost to the Royal Rumble, Cam, tell me what you remember about the story to that point of The Undertaker and Kane.
It's got to be Kane. It's got to be Kane.
Gotta be Kane.
Oh my goodness. This was before my parents would spring on a pay-per-view. And when I say before they'd spring on a pay-per-view, my parents have never sprung on a pay-per-view.
Right.
The first pay-per-view I bought. That was that KB Toys money. But But no, Kane was the Undertaker's brother who was supposed to have died in the fire, but survived. And he was huge and monstrous. And I remember seeing Kane like on the highlight shows afterward come out, and he was just the biggest son of a bitch you ever seen in your life. Undertaker couldn't, and what I remember was Undertaker couldn't do nothing with him. Like Undertaker couldn't do nothing with him. As bad as the Undertaker was, he could not deal with Kane. Like Kane was too bad of a dude. And so, like that was probably the first story I really remember outside of like Star Wars of family problems coming back to bite you in the ass. So Kane was a frightening dude, probably right, like for me, probably up until like WrestleMania 15. You know what I mean? Like I'm a little bit older. I've been watching a little bit longer. He's been nerfed a little bit at that point. But Kane was a frightening dude, like from the jump. And Glenn Jacobs was just in, and he kept getting in better shape. But like normally a guy that size, like as big as the Undertaker was, Undertaker wasn't chiseled. You know what I mean? Like you had your Sid Justices, but outside of that, and then Nash was in great shape too. But most guys that size were like functionally strong, but not like bodybuilder looking guys. Kane was the scariest dude I'd ever seen. He was frightening. Absolutely.
Literally the Michael Myers of the WWF.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
The interesting thing, though, that was happening during this month from the DX pay-per-view to the Royal Rumble, though. So Kane debuted in October, right? Mm-hmm. He debuted at Bad Blood, took out The Undertaker, his older brother, tombstoned him, spent the next few months not only attacking The Undertaker, but attacking anybody and everybody in his way to get to The Undertaker, right? It was like, that was the whole story. The interesting thing that happened, though, was that eventually in December of 97, everybody that was attacked by Kane, they wanted their revenge. And they decided, we're going to come together. We're going to take you out. We're tired of you interrupting our matches. So you got the Disciples of Apocalypse. You got Flash Funk, Ahmed Johnson, all these guys. And they decided, you know what, Kane, enough is enough. So they started trying to beat him down. They're not doing really well because Kane's a monster. But then all of a sudden, The Undertaker comes out. And we think that The Undertaker is going to attack Kane too, right? Because Kane had been beating him up every week. So we thought finally The Undertaker is going to get his revenge. But he doesn't do it. He fights the other guys off. He saves his brother. And Kane kind of looks at him. He wasn't talking at that point. He just kind of looked at him and gave that little head tilt.
Yeah.
And we thought, oh, this is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So this week at Penn State, when Shawn Michaels said, I have an announcement, we're going to introduce the newest member of D-Generation X. And he introduces Kane as the newest member of D-Generation X. Do you remember playing like those old PlayStation games where you could like create your wrestler and you could change the colors on their costume?
You had green Kane?
I had green Kane, and he was my favorite guy to play with.
Yeah. There's that one promo pic that exists in the world of Kane in the DX green. There's one that exists that he never came out in. I would have done it just once, just to sell some merch.
Yeah, when he was teaming with X-Pac, that would have been the
Mhm.
perfect time. But we weren't there yet. So Shawn Michaels calls out Kane. Kane doesn't come out. The Undertaker comes out. And he gets in the ring and he says, like, cool hand Luke, you keep my family out of this. And he grabs Michaels by the throat. Triple H hits Undertaker with a crutch. The two are beating on the Undertaker. And then the lights go out and Kane's music hits. And the pop that Kane got when those lights went out, like, I wish I could bottle it. This was how hot. Like, maybe Austin. Austin was probably like the biggest pop getter. But other than that, Kane, when he came out to save the Undertaker from DX, that was one of the loudest reactions I've ever heard. Fans wanted this to happen. So Kane comes out, and we don't know. Jim Ross is saying, who's he going to help? Is he going to help the Undertaker, or is he going to help Shawn Michaels? Kane grabs Shawn Michaels by the ponytail, just really bitched him out, threw him to the side, chases DX up the stage. So now Kane's at the top of the stage. Undertaker's in the ring. They look at each other. And Kane does the move that Undertaker does. He gives him the little arm thing. Yeah, you remember. He's saluting the Undertaker. He's honoring him. He's saying, I'm with you.
Yeah.
And the Undertaker does it back. And for just a little while, we're convinced that the Undertaker and Kane are one unit. Do you remember this?
I do. Absolutely. Absolutely. And we know how many times that goes back and forth over history. But yes, at the time, absolutely.
It was the coolest thing. Paul Bearer came out one week and he said, oh, Undertaker, you took my Kane from me. We thought that they were like on the same page, right? And that brings us to Royal Rumble 1998. We finally made it, Kim. Are you ready to talk about the 98 Royal Rumble?
If I'm not ready, let's get ready.
Are you ready? So it took place in San Jose, California at the San Jose Arena. The Wrestling Observer gave 49% of readers gave the show a thumbs up. So almost half, 33% gave it a thumbs down, 17% gave it a thumbs in the middle. You mentioned that you weren't yet watching pay-per-views yet. Neither was I. We were 11 or 12 years old. We didn't have the money. What are we going to do? But do you remember, 90s kids know, do you remember you could go to the channel that the pay-per-view was on and you couldn't see it? It was all scrambled, like some of those shows that your dad watched, right?
I have no recollection of any channel that would do anything like that whatsoever.
Right.
But let's say that I did. If I did, I would say, yes, Channel 99. Salute.
I remember watching this full pay-per-view, all 3 hours of it, literally just listening to it. And I thought like I had found a cheat code. Like, I couldn't see it, but I knew what was happening. And that was the very first pay-per-view that I ever watched. And it still holds a very fond place in my heart.
And it's weird, like to think about the show that kind of like not even solidifies, but really puts Steve Austin on that path. For that to only get like half the people approving of it is like, whoa, what a time that was. Yeah.
If they only knew. Yeah, this really was like kind of the show that solidified Austin, like sent him on his road to WrestleMania.
Absolutely.
So voters or readers of the Wrestling Observer voted Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker as the best match of the night, which duh. And they met in a casket match. Tell me, Cam, what's the best casket match of all time?
Best casket match? Oh man. Throw some out there for me.
So The Undertaker took on Kama Mustafa, the Supreme
Not that one. Not the Supreme Fight Machine. Not that one.
The Undertaker fought Yokozuna in a casket match.
It was an okay one.
He fought Goldust in a casket match.
I think I did really actually like that one.
That was actually kind of an underrated feud back in.
Yeah. What's the? I'm trying to think. What were the casket matches that he wasn't in?
I know there were some. I mean, Darby Allin just did one, so
that was actually pretty good. Darby and his little 114-pound dives. I love those. But you know what's interesting? You asked me what the best casket match was. Again, this is the time before I was even like capable of watching pay-per-views. So a lot of these happened when I wasn't even in like position. Wait, did Undertaker and MVP have a casket match?
You know, they may have, like, in that
Am I
weird
misremembering that? Like, I want to.
2007. They might have. I know he fought Mark Henry once in a casket match, and I think Mr. Anderson or Kennedy.
Yeah, no, Undertaker and MVP. I think they had one.
I'm gonna have to look that up on Peacock.
Yeah, I wonder, but he had one with Mr. Kennedy. It's that one then, because I was a Kennedy mark. That's the best.
Were you? All right.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna say, I think this was the best casket match of all time. You had the Undertaker, you had Shawn Michaels. These opponents were made for each other, I think. Plus, you have the added bonus of like the Kane stories. So you had the drama, you had the athleticism. I don't know, man. The match went 20 minutes and 37 seconds. And I feel like recently on Twitter, didn't you say that the Mania 25 match between Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker is one of your favorites? Did you say that at some point?
I said it's one of them. It's funny. I talk about like Shawn Michaels, and I've said honest but not great things about him. The very best wrestling match I've ever seen, if you combine talent and stage, is Angle HBK WrestleMania 21. It's absolutely perfect. But yeah, I wasn't there for either Taker HBK. I was there the next year for Taker Triple H, where HBK was the ref, though. It was in Miami.
I was at that WrestleMania too.
Yeah, I was there for sure. That was my first one I attended.
Yeah. Awesome. So they had their match. As you would expect, Undertaker kind of had his way with Shawn Michaels. Undertaker actually chokeslammed Shawn Michaels into the casket. Mm-hmm. One time, he even jumped from the ring apron to the casket and tombstone Shawn Michaels into the casket, which was probably the coolest tombstone that people had seen up to that point.
Yeah, so you tombstone him on the apron and he fell into the casket, right?
No, he jumped off the apron into the casket.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was insane. Like, I don't know how they faked that, but they did. And you thought that the Undertaker was going to win the match. He almost slammed the casket down, but then the damn New Age Outlaws came out. And they started attacking the Undertaker. And then Los Boricuas came out, and they started attacking the Undertaker, trying to get their revenge from the time that he saved Kane from them. But finally, you knew it was going to happen. The crowd was chanting, "We want Kane," and the crowd got Kane. Kane came out, cleared house. So now it's just him and Undertaker in the ring. He did his little set the ring on fire move. And then he attacked the Undertaker.
Yeah.
And he broke my heart, Cam. He broke my heart.
You let a giant half dead mute break your heart. You got to stop letting your heart out. You got to stop letting your heart out just to anybody. You should have known better. But yes, like again, the twists and turns in their relationship in a world of cartoon, that was very believable. Because they presented it as these are two people who, even if they ever get along, will have reason not to. But yeah, it's a very good setup, a very good both long-term and short-term in that it's December, January when Kane starts to come around, but never all the way. So yeah, you could see him being temperamental. Again, like somebody who was born out of the Michael Myerses and the Jason Voorhees of the world, even when they would show that compassion, or specifically like a Jason Voorhees, that compassion or the confusion, you'd always snap back to the killing. And that's exactly what Kane did.
That is exactly. You know, and we should, looking back now, like we watched these shows, looking back, it was obvious. Like you know now, as a wrestling fan that's been a fan for years, you would have seen it coming a mile away. Right? If it happened today. Maybe that's not true though, because I was convinced that Billy Gunn was going to turn on the Acclaimed, and he didn't. So
yeah, well, I was convinced that the Acclaimed would, win a Black History Month, not lose to two guys with 4 matches between the two of them. But things happen. These things occur.
Do you think that they ruined Black History Month with that
Um,
rivalry?
didn't ruin Black History Month, but whenever somebody, and this is it hasn't happened in a while, but when we used to have that argument of, hey, AEW should make X black wrestler champion or in the main event or on TV, and somebody would say, well, I mean, what black wrestlers are there to choose from? Nobody's really established. And then I would say, none of you have ever seen Austin Gunn wrestle before AEW. You've never seen his house shows, you've never seen his tapes, but here he is on TV. And so, no disrespect to Austin Gunn, ain't his fault he got a job. But like, let's not pretend like they can't just put anybody anywhere they want to. So no, Black History Month is not ruined, but let's not pretend like you, Tony Khan, you have the power to just put anybody anywhere you want to. Just you might have put these kids up there a little too soon, but we'll see.
Well, you know what was ruined was this casket match. Kane chokeslammed Undertaker into the casket. Shawn Michaels shut the door, won the match. Something we haven't talked about yet, which is kind of a big deal. In the very early moments of the match, the Undertaker backdropped Shawn Michaels over the top rope and onto the casket. And that move, that little simple move, is what took Shawn Michaels' career 4 years off of his career.
Changed so much, like just off. And the thing is, like, it being a spot at the beginning of the match tells you, like, this is something that they worked out. This is something that they felt was safe. This was just the start of a 20-minute match. Like, they were, okay, we're going to do this. Then the next thing we're going to, and you just never know. And it just really changed the trajectory of a lot of people's careers, specifically Shawn Michaels and Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, yeah, this was Shawn Michaels' second to last match for 4 years. Like, you could have one more match at WrestleMania. We'll cover that in long form in the future. But other than that, like, he wouldn't wrestle again until 2002. This was 1998. It was, man. So that was a big deal. But Shawn Michaels did end up winning the match. He and Hunter and Chyna escaped to the back with the championship in tow so that he could prepare for his inevitable battle with Stone Cold Steve Austin at WrestleMania 14. The Undertaker did not get off that easily because Kane, not content with just tossing his brother in the match, he decided, you know what? I want to murder you.
Yeah. Kane was playing for keeps. You know, you feel like they made Kane clean up the house that burned down all by himself with one broom and one dustpan, and he just never let go of that. So
And so then, he locks Undertaker. He locks Undertaker in the casket, and then Paul Bearer comes out, and he's got matches. He's got gasoline. You know what's going to happen, but you don't think it will. Like, somebody will come and save him, or the Undertaker will escape. You've seen the Undertaker kind of locked in the casket before. That was the aforementioned match with Yokozuna. But you figure the Undertaker, something's going to happen. They're not going to set this casket on fire, are they? They are. They roll the casket up to the top of the stage. Kane, for some reason, has an axe because he is Jason Voorhees. Starts chopping the casket up, pours the gasoline on it, lights the match, and sets the Undertaker on fire.
Like, I don't know, if Glenn Jacobs would be caught doing any of this, but Kane can shoot dice. That was a smooth toss of that lighter. That was a smooth toss. Yeah, Kane can definitely shoot some dice. He can roll some sevens.
Absolutely. And that is what would conclude the 1998 Royal Rumble. We're about out of here, but Cam, kind of tell me what your overall impressions were of this show, of this match, and kind of just this point in time for D-Generation X.
Well, we talk a lot about Shawn Michaels and not going to lose to this guy, not going to lose a title this way. The Undertaker was like the perfect person to face in like these big time title matches and pay-per-view matches, because the not beating the Undertaker would always be something like Kane, a supernatural force, or something that they built up to. So it worked. Like you said, perfect dance partners. So good that we talk about their matches, from 97, 98. And then we look at their matches almost 20 years later, like it's just about like how good they are. Because it was it 25 and 26 or 24 and 25 where they face each other?
25 and 26.
25 and 26. So we're talking about them having matches 11 and 12 years before the fact of the highest quality. Right. And then to go back, a decade and a half later and still do that. Like you said, perfect dance partner. Shawn Michaels is not a short man, but in terms of being up against the Undertaker, there's a clear size difference. I think he brought up the athleticism that the Undertaker has. Shawn Michaels would sell like hell for him. The Undertaker would take Shawn's moves when appropriate. Shawn would fight from under and would just go and go and go. And then when you introduce the casket match wasn't new, but when you introduce something like a Hell in a Cell match, where Shawn Michaels, being the consummate performer, wants to show you how good he can do in these gimmicks. I thought it was fantastic. Like, they were really good, and again, plays into who the Undertaker is. Let Shawn Michaels win in a way that's not satisfying, but plays up what DX represents in the moment, because part of this is how much turmoil DX caused and perpetuated, not just with the authority figures, but with the wrestlers. So you get a finish where they all come out and cause havoc. Shawn Michaels still gets to keep the title. So, yeah.
And he is on a collision course with Stone Cold Steve Austin. We will cover both the No Way Out pay-per-view that took place after the Royal Rumble and WrestleMania at a later date. But that is it for the 1998 Royal Rumble. What do you think? Did you have fun? Was this a good talk?
This was great, man. This is fantastic. We don't, and when I say we, as like media, we don't. I'm so bad at admitting that like I do this stuff at a high level. We as media don't always get to flex like our reflections and history muscles. So this is great. Like, I like being able to really dive into these things and not just being asked what I thought of Raw. So this is great. This is fantastic. I can't wait to do more, to really get into this stuff. It's fun tackling things that we saw as kids, but interpreted it in a totally different way. So no, this is great. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's super fun to revisit. There was a lot of stuff that I missed when I was a kid that I'm picking up now, and just like, I'm a big fan of nostalgia. I love this stuff. I love going back and pretending that I'm a 10-year-old boy again, and I'm going to go to work tomorrow and tell my coworkers to suck it.
Well, it might be the last time that you're at work, but I hope you enjoy yourself.
And I hope that you enjoyed yourself, audience. We will get back with you here in a week or two. For bodyslam.net, he's Cam Hawkins. I am Nick Perkins. This has been Break It Down, a D-Generation X retrospective. And if you're not down with that, we got 2 words for you.
Good night.